The wound that calls itself desire is often a map drawn in invisible ink. He meets her on a rainy evening when the city smells of wet stone and newspaper. She smiles with the particular slant of someone who has learned to keep distance as safety. Their start is a fevered magnetism, rapid words, borrowed confidence, too much recognition in a single glance. He tells himself this proves destiny. She tells herself it is survival. Jung would point to patterns beneath the spectacle, the lure of the wounded anima or animus, the human habit of reenacting early relational economies until something breaks. Toxic love is not simply harm, it is a staged rehearsal where both partners play roles written long before they were aware. Apologies become rituals, reconciliations like rehearsed apologies in which the old bargain is renewed. I will earn love by pleading, you will prove love by withholding. These scenes feel inevitable because they are rehearsed by the unconscious. The soul, in its hidden plan, uses repetition as pedagogy. It arranges encounters that mirror the missing pieces, placing the wound where it can be seen. The cruelty of the design is also its compassion. The psyche keeps offering the same hurt to push awareness toward repair. He mistakes the intensity for intimacy. Storms are taken for arrival. Nights are full of declarations that evaporate by morning, leaving only residue, an ache he covers with busy ritual. She is both mirror and wound-bearer, reflecting the parts he refuses to accept. In their arguments, he recognizes a child's voice, a parent's refusal, a pattern of abandonment and clinging braided together. Where attachment should be shelter, it is a theater of old debts. Jung asks, what does the soul want us to know through this repetition? The answer is rarely comfort. It is recognition, integration, a reclaiming of capacities mislaid in childhood. One evening, after another litany of hurt, a small pause occurs between them. Not silence to avoid, but a space that holds possibility. In that gap he feels a tremor, an echo of a different life. The plan beneath the pain is not to punish, but to reveal. The self needs to be seen whole, not as halves economized by fear. The hidden design is slow and patient. It will repeat scenes, rearrange actors, until one of them stops performing and chooses differently. It waits until one answers with honest, steady will. He begins to notice how the cycle turns like a wheel. At first, each argument feels new, charged with fresh outrage. But as days unfold, the scenes repeat with uncanny precision. The words shift, yet the essence remains. Accusation, retreat, apology, embrace, silence. Jung's concept of complexes explains this, bundles of unresolved emotion, charged with energy, activated like traps. When she criticizes him for neglect, it is not her voice he hears, but the echo of an earlier authority, sharp and cold. When he withdraws, it is not her he abandons, but the child within him who once learned that distance was safer than pleading. Toxic love thrives on such misrecognitions. Each sees not the partner before them, but the projection of what has been long carried. He realizes this slowly, painfully, as if waking in fragments from a fever. In their laughter, he feels genuine warmth, but it dissolves quickly into suspicion, like light vanishing behind sudden clouds. Still, something within insists on staying, as though the torment conceals a hidden teaching. He begins writing notes after each conflict, tracing patterns. What word triggered him? What silence angered her? What wound was pressed? Slowly, the ledger takes shape, not unlike the one Jung kept for his dreams. One evening, he dreams of a locked room. The key lies in plain sight, yet every time he bends to pick it up, his hand turns translucent, unable to grasp it. He wakes unsettled, recognizing the dream as more than fantasy. It mirrors the helplessness of his waking life. But the dream also whispers, there is a door, there is a key, even if your hands do not yet know how to hold it. The next day, while walking through the city, he notices how often he catches glimpses of couples. A woman scolding her partner with weary familiarity, a man clutching his lover's hand as though it might vanish. He sees himself in both roles. He begins to understand Jung's warning that what we do not make conscious, appears outside of us as fate. Perhaps this relationship, bruised and volatile, is less about her and more about the psychic inheritance he has not yet faced. Yet still, he clings. Desire disguises itself as devotion, and somewhere beneath the ache, the soul's hidden plan continues to weave, patient as a weaver at a loom, waiting for recognition.
The cycle deepens, and with it, his exhaustion. Nights blur into mornings heavy with apology texts and half-formed promises. Each reconciliation feels like borrowed time, fragile as glass. Yet within the fragility, he senses a strange insistence, an almost sacred pressure. Jung would call it the necessity of suffering, the psyche's way of refusing to let us remain asleep. He begins therapy, though reluctantly. Sitting across from a quiet analyst, he recounts the same stories he once told himself with passion: how she misunderstands, how he only wants peace, how love should not be so hard. The analyst does not argue. She simply asks, "And what part of you chose this?" The question lingers, burning. For days afterward, he cannot dismiss it. Did he choose the storm, or did some hidden current pull him toward it? In the meantime, the relationship escalates. Arguments arrive faster, reconciliations shorter. What once took weeks now cycles in hours. He notices her eyes, once bright with charm, now often clouded with suspicion. He notices his voice, louder, sharper, startling even to himself. The toxic spiral has accelerated, compressing lessons into harsher doses. One evening, after a particularly venomous quarrel, he walks alone by the river. The water is black glass, carrying the city's lights in trembling lines. He recalls a passage he once underlined in Jung. The soul has its own logic, its own purposes, often hidden from the ego until revealed by suffering. The words strike with new force. What if this ordeal is not a failure, but a design? What if the soul has summoned precisely this entanglement, not to punish, but to force a confrontation with what he has buried? As he lingers by the river, a memory surfaces uninvited. Himself as a child, waiting at the window for a father who never arrived. The same ache, the same mixture of longing and fury. He realizes then that his love for her is not only about her, it is about that child, still waiting at the window, still bargaining for arrival. The insight does not free him, but it cracks the surface. For the first time, he senses that the hidden plan is not about fixing her or saving the relationship. It is about seeing himself clearly, standing in the raw truth of his oldest wound. And in that recognition, the wheel of repetition trembles, as though the soul has felt him begin to listen.
The recognition unsettles him more than any argument. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Every word, every silence, every gesture between them now feels like a replay of a script written decades ago. He studies her anger and feels his mother's sharp tone vibrating beneath it. He notices his own withdrawal and hears the echo of a father who turned inward, unreachable. What once felt like love's chaos now looks like theater, a stage where both actors stumble through inherited lines. Yet this awareness does not release him immediately. Awareness alone is not liberation, it is confrontation. He stays, partly out of fear, partly out of hope, and partly because the unconscious has not finished its lesson. Jung described this paradox. The psyche binds us until the wound is metabolized, not simply observed. Toxic love persists because it still has something to teach. One morning, after another sleepless night, he sits with his journal. He writes the same sentence over and over. I am not that child anymore. At first, the words feel hollow, but with repetition, they begin to loosen something inside him. Like a knot pulled gently apart. He realizes he has lived much of his adult life as though still appealing to absent figures, parents, authority, partners, pleading for recognition that cannot be given. When he meets her that evening, he notices the shift. She rages about a trivial matter, her words sharp as glass. Normally, he would defend, argue, collapse, or retreat. Instead, he simply listens, not with resignation but with clarity. He sees her not as enemy or savior, but as another soul caught in her own patterns. Compassion flickers, not indulgence, not excuse, but recognition. The fight ends sooner, not with reconciliation, but with a strange neutrality. That night, he dreams again of the locked room. This time his hand is solid. He picks up the key, yet when he turns it in the lock, the door does not swing open. Instead, it dissolves. He wakes startled, realizing the message, the barrier was never real. The walls were built of memory, the lock sustained by belief. For the first time, he senses that leaving this cycle may be possible. Not through dramatic exit or violent rupture, but through quiet refusal to play the role assigned. The soul's hidden plan is not to trap him forever in toxicity, but to make him strong enough to choose differently. And that choice, he realizes, is approach.
The decision does not arrive in one triumphant gesture, but in increments. Like dawn seeping through curtains, he notices how his body tightens when her name lights up his phone. He notices how laughter has become rare, how tenderness is rationed. He writes in his journal, "This is not love, it is rehearsal, and I am weary of rehearsing." Still, the bond resists breaking. Their history, though brief in calendar time, feels stretched across lifetimes. He remembers Jung's notion of enantiodromia, how energies, when pushed to their extreme, turn into their opposite. Passion became control. Intimacy became surveillance. What once felt like destiny now tastes of poison. The reversal itself is the teacher. One evening, during yet another quarrel, he feels the old script cueing him to defend, to argue, to collapse. But instead, he pauses. He breathes, and he says quietly, "I will not do this anymore." She stares, stunned, as though a line has been forgotten in the play. The silence that follows is heavier than any shouting match, yet strangely clean. In that silence, he feels the soul's hand on his shoulder, steady, approving. He leaves, not in anger, not in triumph, but in clarity. The nights that follow are raw. He mourns not only her, but the part of himself that believed salvation could be negotiated through suffering. Yet beneath the grief runs a current of freedom. For the first time in years, he dreams not of locked rooms or endless doors, but of open fields, sunlight spilling without obstruction. Slowly, he begins to rebuild. Therapy sessions deepen. His journal fills with honest reflections. He cultivates solitude without panic, learns that silence can soothe rather than punish. Friends notice the change, subtle at first, a softness in his voice, a steadier gaze. He feels it too, like inhabiting his body for the first time. In retrospect, he sees the hidden plan with sharper eyes. The toxic love was not a mistake, but a crucible. It exposed the fractures within, replayed the forgotten ache, forced him to confront the child at the window. Without it, he might have remained asleep, drifting through relationships without depth or awakening. With it, painful as it was, he discovered the truth Jung hinted at. The soul conspires for wholeness, even through devastation. And so he walks forward, no longer searching for intensity, but for resonance. He carries scars, yes, but also a compass, one attuned not to toxic cycles, but to the quiet rhythm of a life aligned with the deeper plan. The wheel has turned, and this time it does not repeat.